Hello Year 4, welcome back. This is the second lesson of a 5-lesson unit of geography work, and let's see what we're going to be up to today. So this lesson theme is climate, okay? We're going to be finding out about what climate means in a minute. So what do you need today? Simple things today, just a pen and some lined paper or an exercise book that maybe you've been given from school to do your work in. So go and get those things and then come back and we'll get started. Today's lesson, we're going to answer 3 questions by the end of the lesson. What is the difference between weather and climate? What is a biome? And how does the climate of the tropical Amazon rainforest compare to the climate of the temperate New Forest in the UK? We are going to start, as usual, with a quiz. This time, the quiz is going to be a quiz on Brazil. So some of the information you might already know, some of them you might have to guess, some of them are multiple choice if they're a bit trickier, so it makes it a little bit easier for you to have a go. And we're just going to warm those brains up and get them thinking about geography. So welcome to Brazil quiz. Here we go. I borrowed this from the ActionAid website. You can see lots of good information on that website. First question. What continent is Brazil in? What continent is Brazil in? Can you remember that from yesterday? Press pause, write down your answer. Okay, how did you do? It's in South America, and you can see Brazil is one of the largest countries in South America. Okay, question number 2. Where did Brazil get its name from? So this time you can just put A, B or C as your answer. This is a multiple choice question. So A, B or C. A, the surname of the first Portuguese captain to land in Brazil. B, the Portuguese word for land. Or C, the Brazil wood tree. Which one of those do you think was where Brazil got its name from in the first place? Press pause, write down your answer. Let's have a look, shall we? Have you managed? Let's have a look. It's from the Brazil wood tree, and we're going to see some Brazil wood trees when we look at the layers of the rainforest as well. So Brazil got its name from the Brazil wood tree, which is all over the country of Brazil. Right, next one. What is the capital of Brazil? We talked about this yesterday. Can you remember? What is the capital of Brazil? Press pause and write your answer. How did you do? It's Brasilia, and you can see on the map it's marked with that star. Brasilia is the capital of Brazil. I wonder if you managed it. Did you manage to spell it right with an S in there, not a Z, I wonder? Right, next question. What do the different parts of the Brazilian flag mean? Means hidden behind me, isn't it? What do the different parts of the Brazilian flag mean? Another multiple choice. So you're going to write A, B or C. A. The yellow represents the sun, the green farmland, the blue the coastline, and the stars are the major cities of Brazil. Or is it B? The green represents the forests in the country, the yellow is its mineral wealth, the blue represents the sky, and each star is a different state. Or is it C? Green, yellow, and blue were the first president's favourite colours. Each star represents a different member of his extended family. Press pause and write A, B, or C. And the correct answer is B. So the green represents all those forests that they've got all over Brazil, that amazing Amazon rainforest that takes up so much of the country. Right, quiz over. Hopefully your geography brains are in gear now. Let's get on with really focusing on what it is that we're going to be doing today. We are going to be thinking about weather and climate, remember, today. So the first thing we need to work out is what's the difference between the two. So people kind of use these words interchangeably, but in geography they have got some very specific meanings which are quite key. And we're going to be looking more at climate today rather than the weather. And let's see why that is. So first of all, the weather is to do with short term. It's to do with day-to-day conditions. So you might well watch a weather forecast on the news in the mornings, or your parents might check the weather forecast. to see what the day is going to bring. Is it going to be rainy? Is it going to be sunny? Is it going to be hot? Is it going to be cold? And that information about weather helps us to make decisions about our day-to-day lives. When you're thinking about weather, we often talk about the temperature, we talk about humidity, so how wet or dry the air is. We talk about precipitation, which is the geographical and scientific name for rain. We think about cloudiness, so what type of clouds there are affect what the weather's going to be like that day. We think about visibility, so how easy it is to see when we go out. Is there really thick fog, which is going to make it difficult for us if we've got to drive somewhere? And we think about wind and the wind speed and direction, because that has an impact on day-to-day weather. Climate, on the other hand, is slightly different. So climate is all to do with patterns. It's about long term. So it's about looking at what's happening to the weather over the long term, not just today or this hour or tomorrow. It's over years and years and years. And often the climate information is based on maybe even 30 years worth of information, and they're looking for patterns in that information. When we think about climate, we often think about averages or the mean. So rather than talking about what's the temperature like today, we might think about what's the average temperature. So if we take all the temperatures for a month and we divide them by 30 or 31 days, what is the average temperature in that area? What is the average rainfall in that area? So it's really looking at patterns, and it shows us trends and cycles. So it shows us what is typically happening in that area. It's also the thing we look at when we think about climate change. So when people talk about climate change, they don't talk about weather change, they talk about climate change, because they're thinking about, in general, over the course of this year, what has happened to the climate over the course of the last 10, over the course of the last 20 or 30 years, what is happening to the climate. And we know at the moment that our climates are getting hotter and hotter. So climate is about weather is about short term, and climate is about long term and patterns, okay? And it's climate we're going to be thinking about today. We're going to be thinking about that long term view of what is happening. The reason we're going to do that is because we're going to think about biomes today. And a biome is a large, naturally occurring community of flora and fauna occupying a major habitat. Each biome has a distinct climate. So what does that mean? Well, we're talking about an area of land or sea that has a community, and flora and fauna means plants and animals. So we've got plants and animals in a particular area that has something in common because of the climate. So we can think about aquatic biomes. So that's biomes that are in the water. And then we can also think about terrestrial biomes. We can think about biomes that are on land. So on land, we have main distinct biomes, and then each biome has also got some smaller groups within it. So first of all, we've got areas that are desert. Then we've got areas that are called something called tundra. We've got areas that are grassland, and we've got areas that are forests. And each of these can be broken up into smaller biomes. So if we think about aquatic, we sometimes talk about marine, and we sometimes talk about freshwater. So marine is the sea, salty areas, and freshwater is the rivers. So when we're looking at biomes, we look at those types. We can also break the others down, and we'll have a look at some further breakdowns in a minute, but the forest that we're particularly thinking of, so we're going to be looking at a forest biome. The two key ways that forests can be broken down is tropical and temperate, and that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at a forest that's in a tropical area and a forest that's in a temperate biome. So here's our biomes. These are the ones that we're going to be looking at. Geographers and scientists don't agree on how many biomes there are. So every time you look at a map and you ask for biomes, there are slightly different ones in it, but we're going to be looking at some main ones today. So the first one we're thinking about is the desert. You can see the desert down there with the camels. The key thing about the climate in the desert is that the temperature is really high and rainfall is really low. So it's a very dry, hot place. Then we're going to look at something called tundra. Now, tundra is a real extreme. They're the areas right up near the North Pole where it's extremely cold, where there isn't really any rainfall, because what they actually get is ice and snow a lot of the time. So tundra is a really extreme place. So the desert's really extreme in its heat and its lack of water. The tundra is a really extreme place because of how cold it is. Then we've got grasslands, and there are two key types of grasslands. There's temperate grasslands. So here's you can see what's called grassland, covered in grass. The temperature's warm, it doesn't get too hot or too cold. And the rainfall is kind of average and quite regular. So that means across the course of the year, it gets quite a lot of rain in most parts of the year. Then we have a savanna, which is similar to a grassland, except that it's a lot hotter and a lot drier. So it still has grass, but you can see the grasses are kind of yellowy grasses. It's got a few trees there as well. So we have a few more trees in the savanna. It's a real issue. The rainfall is a real issue because they have periods of drought. So they have what's called wet and dry seasons. So they have a season where there's loads of water and then a season where there isn't any water at all. And they are really hot in the savannah. And I'm sure you've seen lots of pictures of often the African savannah is the first one we think of. Then we've got our forests. So we have got a temperate forest. So that's the kind of forest we would see in our country, where the temperatures are relatively warm and where rainfall is quite moderate and even across the year. You never know, do you, in our country, whether you're going to get rain or not. The other key thing about temperate forests is they have 4 seasons. So we have our autumn and our winter and our spring and our summer. And the climate in those seasons, the patterns of climate are really clear in those seasons. So that's a temperate forest biome. We then have the tropical forest biome that we're going to be looking at. And this is the key thing about this is it's hot and it's wet. So you have lots of temperature and lots of rainfall. And then finally we have taiga. And taiga is a more severe temperature and it's got a lot less rainfall. So you can see here, there's some examples of that. So let's have a look and see where these biomes are. Here we go, look at that. So you can see right at the top, right in the very north of the northern hemisphere, we've got the tundra, the really cold, snowy places. Then slightly further down, we've got the taiga forest. So it's still quite cold, but they have a little bit more rainfall. Then we have, you can see those yellow patches everywhere are the desert, hot and dry. Then the lighter green is the temperate forest. And you can see if you spot Britain on the map up there, it's got temperate forests. And then we've got some grasslands. And then we have got some taiga forests. So you can have a look there and you can see those. If we have a look at how that works, you can see we have that pattern that we talked about yesterday of the tropical rainforests that are really close to the equator. In between those 2 lines of Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, we have some real heat. So if we've not got tropical rainforests, we've got savanna or we've got desert because it's hot in that section. Okay, and the further north you get, you can see we have something called lines of latitude. So as well as the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic and the equators, we also have other lines. If I show you the next, can you see this next map's got lots of lines on it, and latitude lines measure how north or south something is. And those lines of latitude break up the world into different biomes. So the further north you are, the colder it gets. And the equator has a line of latitude that's 0. And if you get really far north, by the time you get right up to the North Pole, it's got a latitude of 90. And if you go right down to the South Pole, it's also got a latitude of 90 south. So that is how latitude lines work. They run horizontally all across the world. They're not really there, but we imagine them like that so that we can actually locate different places. And you can see, again, our rainforests are right in the center of that with the equator. Why is it then that this area right around the center of the Earth is so hot? Well, if you look at this diagram, you can see why. So look at those yellow arrows. When the sun's heat hits that top part of the Earth, can you see how the rays are spread? Can you see how wide those rays are spread? When you get to the equator, because it's much flatter and rounder in that section there, and sometimes it is in direct line with the sun, you get much closer rays. So the intensity of the sun is much greater near the equator. And that is why the closer you get to the equator, the warmer the conditions are. So we've got biomes, we've got these key areas in the world that are very distinctive because of their climate. And as a result of that, the flora and fauna alters. So the plants and animals in those places are similar in similar biomes and different in different biomes. The comparison we're going to do today is between 2 kinds of biomes and 2 kinds of forest. So you can see on our map, we've got the Amazon tropical forest near that equator, a hot, wet area. And then we've got a temperate forest. We're going to look at a place called Brockenhurst in the New Forest. If you live in Southampton or Poole, I'm sure you may well have visited the New Forest, as it's quite close to you. And it's variable. Sometimes it's warm, sometimes it's cold, sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's rainy, sometimes it's dry, but there's a spread of climate throughout the year. So we're going to have a really close look at the data now. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the temperature in the New Forest. And you can see we haven't got every day's temperature. That would be impossible to look at. We have got some average temperatures. So people have looked at the information over the course of a number of years, and they said this is the average temperature that it is in these months. So what I'd like you to do now is to start recording some information about the temperature in the New Forest. And you can see I've put 3 pieces of information down that I want you to work out. So I want to know the highest daytime temperature and what month was that in, the lowest daytime temperature and what month or months was that in, and then I want the variance in temperature. That means how much has it changed? And to work that out, you're going to need to work out the difference between the lowest temperature and the highest temperature. How much is the range between hot and cold? So how much does our temperature vary over the course of a year, typically? They're climate questions. They're about averages and patterns in there. So you're going to have a look at the temperature. So press pause now and see if you can complete that for me. Okay, hopefully you've done temperature. I want you to do a very similar thing now with rainfall. So you've got 2 bits of information on here. You've got the number of days it rains and the amount of rain that we get. And you can see you've got 4 bits of information that I want to know. What's the highest average monthly rainfall and in what month or months is that in? What's the lowest average monthly rainfall and what months is that in? What's the total average rainfall for the year? So you're going to have to take all of those averages and add them up and work out how much in total is the typical amount of rain that happens in the New Forest over the course of a year. And then finally, what is the total number of days with some rain in the year? So you're going to need to add up all of those days of rain across those months and tell me how many in total across the year. Press pause and have a go at that now. Okay, time for answers. How did you do? Do you think you've done okay? Let's have a look. So the highest daytime temperature was 21 in July and August. The lowest temperature, 7 degrees in January and February, which meant that the gap was 14 degrees. So between the lowest and the highest temperature. So our temperature in a temperate area, in a temperate biome, varies by 7 degrees. So it's not a huge, 14 degrees, sorry, between 7 and 21. So it's not a huge variety. We're not going really, really hot and then really, really cold. Our rainfall, we get about 86 millimetres in December and only about 42 millimetres in July, which makes our average rainfall for the year about 769. So we're talking about between 700 and 800, so 7 centimetres, 8 centimetres of rain a year. And we have about 159 days of rain. How does that compare to a tropical climate? Same questions now, looking at a place called Manaus in Brazil, right in the centre of the Amazon rainforest. So can you answer the same questions again for this climate? So write the title Manaus and write the information about this climate for me. And same thing again for the rainfall in the centre of the Amazon rainforest. Off you go. Right, have you managed it? Let's see what it is like in that tropical biome of the Amazon rainforest. 33 degrees is the hottest it gets, and it's hottest in August, September and October. The lowest daytime temperature is 31. So that's a tiny variation. It's always hot, 2 degrees difference. Then the rain, 316 in March, 55 in August, with a total of over 2,000 millimetres. And that is what classes it as a rainforest. It needs to have that level of water. And then 261 days. So you're very lucky if you visit the rainforest and you don't get rain, because there's more days of rain than there is not of rain. So what are we going to do with this information? The final thing you're going to do in this lesson is to produce a paragraph of writing for me. So I want you to take, you've got some information now about the climate in the temperate forest of the New Forest. You've got some information about the tropical rainforest in Brazil. Can you compare the two? What do you notice now? We're looking for a pattern. So is there big variations? Which one's hotter? Which one's colder? Which one's wetter? So I want you to write some sentences summarising the information that you have found out today. Off you go. How did you get on? Did you manage that? I'm sure you've worked out that the tropical area is hotter, that the temperate area has got a bigger variety of temperature, that the tropical area is wetter, and that there's much more rainfall in that area than there is in a temperate area. So that's the comparison between the climates and the biomes of temperate and tropical forests. What are we doing tomorrow? Tomorrow we're going to really focus down now to the Amazon. We're going to be looking at the 4 layers of the rainforest, what the 4 layers are like, and the animals and plants that grow in those layers. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Well done for today. You can go and wow everybody with your amazing geographical vocabulary about climate. See if your parents know what the difference between weather and climate is. I wonder if they do. And I will see you tomorrow.